Hello and welcome to HealthTech Hour on UK Health Radio. My name is Steve Roost, and each week we bring you the best news, views, and interviews with the leaders, clinicians, and CEOs who are driving the health tech revolution in the UK and beyond. I'm a CEO and founder of a health tech company myself, and I'm passionate about the people and companies who are changing the world. Before I introduce today's guests, as always, I'd like to remind everyone to follow us on the social, which is at HealthTech Hour, and also follow UK Health Radio, which is at UK Health Radio, just to stay on top of all of the great content coming up on the station. So today is another show where we have two guests on, and based on our pre-production meeting, I think it's going to go very well because both of them seem to have quite a lot that they want to say. So that's good. It's always a good start. Continuing our theme of how AI, so artificial intelligence, can be used in healthcare, today's guests, Anuj Saboo and Jonathan Abraham, are the founders of Healum, Healum, which is an AI-powered healthcare platform which helps in the treatment and monitoring of people with long-term chronic conditions, such as diabetes. Healum has been identified as one of the trailblazers in using artificial intelligence to improve how the healthcare system helps to treat people, and announced a few days ago that it has raised over £2 million from, among others, the Northern Powerhouse Fund. Healum is already at use in scale across the NHS, and it may well be that listeners have come into contact with it without realizing it, either because they use it or because their doctors use it already. So, Anuj, Jonathan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Steve. Yeah, nice to be here. How are you doing?
Good, good. I ask everyone like this just kind of straight out the gate, but how are you guys faring? I guess lockdown slightly eased. How is the mood in the camp at the moment over at Healum?
Yeah, I think, hey, Steve, it's Jonathan. Yeah, the mood in the camp's really good, actually. We've, I think during this period, we've tried to find ways to bring the team together and do fun stuff, from like geeky online games on Friday, and every day having like a little sort of team group lunch together and stuff. So yeah, I think we're all just looking forward to being able to eventually get out in the sun and meet each other. We've hired some people that we've actually just literally met online. So,
yeah, no, yeah. We're in the same way. I think lots of people that have come on the show have said the same thing. It's like, I mean, you would never ever hire people that you've not met before, but you have to hire. So, that I guess that's the benefit of video calling.
Yeah, and we've also been talking about like what it will actually feel like working next to each other, because some of these people you have never sat next to each other and worked, like right next to each other. So it's going to be a completely different experience. So yeah, really looking forward to the lockdown ending and us being able to like come together.
Yeah, I think there's all of these small challenges that actually we'll be glad of having to deal with, because it means that this period of pandemic is either over or nearly over for the foreseeable, which would be great.
Yeah, definitely.
So as regular listeners know, the show's generally split up into three parts. So the first part is an origins, about where you guys sort of started and how you came to be doing what you're doing. The middle part is what you're doing right now with Healum that's changing the world. And then the final part is what's the future for Healum. And then if there are any topics of the day that we want to kick around, then we sort of do it in that part. Obviously there's two of you, so we kind of, it ends up being a bit of a mishmash, but I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. So just to kick off with, each of you, feel free to start, whoever wants to start, but what kind of journey did you take before you ended up starting Healum? Where did you sort of, what journey were you on that ended with you deciding to do this Healum company?
Cool. So I'll start first with that one. So I think the journey that I was on personally, both from a professional perspective and from a personal perspective, sort of started to all point to a direction that I really wanted to spend the rest of my life unlocking people's health potential and really supporting them with all the digital services and technology skills that I had gathered along the way. Wow. To help them make better health choices in their lives, and live in a way that them and their family could live as long as possible and as healthy as possible. And for me personally, so so I'm about 39 now, around my early 30s, as many of us do when we kind of get over the 30 mark. You start to like hit certain sort of chronic health problems. Before that, you're a bit sort of like fancy free, early 20s, and just enjoying life, but working really hard. And so for me, it was I was borderline obese. I was about 19 kilos heavier than I am now. I had gout, hypertension, and all these sort of chronic conditions were all building. And when I actually tried to change my health and try to address some of these problems, it was really hard, and I kept hitting points of failure. But there was really frustrating things like different healthcare professionals not having a view of my data and not really being able to coordinate all the multitude of different people inside the NHS and outside the NHS and getting them all kind of working to really give me the personalised care. And I felt really passionate that personalised care was something I wanted doing. And I'd lost my mum early on before she really should have gone. And I felt that I really wanted to try and help other families so that they could, spot risks before they happen and manage their health in a way that was congruent with their life. So that was sort of my personal journey. On the professional side, I was, working in big data and AI and solutions prior to founding Healum, a number of companies, both small and large, and saw that there was a role for really great connected systems and services to better support people to manage their own healthcare. And then I met Anuj on the way.
All right. And so how did you guys meet?
So yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting. So basically, my personal journey has been slightly different. So very quickly, when I was little, my inspiration, can we name names like some other brands and things like that on the show?
Yeah, you can say what you want, as long as it's not swearing.
All right.
Johan will be very
my
upset.
Inspiration was, if you know Knight Rider from David Hasselhoff.
Yeah.
The car, the kit. That was my inspiration.
Kit, yeah. Everyone loves that car.
Up, when I saw that car, I was like, I want to make that car. So that was my decision of getting into any sort of computing. It wasn't games. It was that kit. I wanted to make that car. So all throughout my sort of childhood, growing up, right up to, studying artificial intelligence like 15 years ago, I was like, I'm going to make that car. I studied robotics and things like that. And that fascinated me, that whole automation aspect. And I also grew up, in a family of scientists and medics, and basically I grew up around that life sciences knowledge, just conversations happening. So didn't really understand anything, but yeah, it was always a passion, and just health was always a passion as well. So I grew up with these two things, and basically I think in 2012. The trigger point for me where I wanted to do something about it is when my father passed away from a very a critical condition, and that was very shocking for me. And at that point I was like, okay, he was such a healthy person, but something like that happened to him. So really need to do something about it. And I personally started tracking my blood results like over a period of 7-8 years, and like looking at test reports, doing blood reports, looking at data, and doing something about it just personally. And professionally, I was at the same time, I was also working at one of these digital transformation companies who go into big NHS trusts and help them sort of go to the cloud. So I saw firsthand what the state of healthcare was, and where there is such a big need, and how the healthcare was under so much pressure. That's when I started thinking about like, okay, something needs to happen. I need to do something about it. And, if I'm interested in it, someone else might be also interested in that same thing. And during that time, it was, I think, just past my, 2012, in 2013, I started looking for people who are similarly interested in healthcare, in doing a business. And I spent quite a lot of time.
Where did you go to look for those type of people?
So for me, I was just going to meetup groups. Like I met hundreds of people, literally, had various levels of meetings. And I came towards the end of the year, 2013. I was quite disappointed because I didn't quite meet like, a meeting of minds and things like that. And I was like, you know what? I was like this literally on New Year's Eve, I was sat there and I was like, oh man, 1 year, nothing has happened, nothing has moved. What am I doing? So I went online, and there's this website called Tech Co-founder something. It's kind of like a Tinder style thing where you meet other people. So I was like, you know what, one final go, I'll put my profile up, see what happens. New Year's Eve, 4 a.m. I'm literally typing that on. I slapped it. I was like, didn't have much hope. Went to sleep. 11 a.m. I wake up next morning. So this is 1st January 2014. And I see a response from this guy. And I was like, I just could not believe it. I was like,
Wow.
what the hell? So that's how we actually kind of made the first connection. He talked about himself, and he sent me like a bunch of load of videos, and it actually came from a Google Mail, like the official Google Mail, and that made it even more suspicious.
Oh, right.
Like, this cannot be it. You were like, what the hell? So
you thought he might be some kind of like catfish or something?
I don't know. I didn't know what to make of it, and then I just wrote back to him. You know what? I'm also gonna. He had mentioned a few things, and I was like, you know what? I'll also risk it. Here's my reply. Let's have a call and then see where it goes. So I just like replied, and then he turned out to be a real person.
That's
awesome.
a great, I mean, that is, I've not heard that I've heard lots of founder stories, but that's one of the best ones I think I've ever heard. So when you first got on the call, like, so I always find it really interesting how you having gone through the process myself a few times, when you move from all that energy and desire and sort of, I would say, top level inspiration into, well, actually, this is the direction that we're then going to go in. So what did that kind of, from that first phone call or that first meeting, how did you start to drill down into what became Healum?
That's another journey.
Yeah, I mean, that was a process of about 9 months of what you could almost describe as sort of founder dating or founder courting in a way. Like I love the fact, by the way, Steve, you describe meetups as old school. That's great. That's actually amazing.
Well, it is that, it is, right?
Yeah, it totally is. So for me, myself, I was also, I worked at Google at the time, and I would go around there and talk to all the various different, engineers, and they were quite happy doing what they were doing. Even some of the ones working on really exciting technology didn't really have the appetite to leave the confines of Shangri-La and enter into the,
Yeah, exactly. No one wants to give up the free ice cream bar or whatever it is.
Exactly. And sort of for me, in a sort of bleary-eyed morning on New Year's Day, I responded to this. But Anuj and I then met up like several times, and it was really just discussing what our overall purpose and values were. A lot of it was, really going to the heart of like, why did we want to set up a health technology company? What is it we wanted to do? What were the problems we wanted to solve? And it became apparent for both of us that anyone who suffers with a condition, or anyone that has a risk of their health progressing badly, or we wanted to assist them, and with all of the different data and insights at the points in their lives where it could actually be useful, and provide them with that selection of services and choices that they need to effectively manage their health. And it came through, I think we met up about once a month for about 9 months to discuss all things, both on a personal and professional level, to really see that we had that vision. I think by the time we sort of got to around September that year, it was clear that we had a strong focus around particularly obesity, and starting to apply some of our ideas around how monitoring can improve health outcomes, how being connected with a team of people can help health outcomes, how using some of the things that we'd learned about behavior change in our past careers could actually have an impact on their lives, how creating great mobile products could support people at different points in their journey. And it started to crystallize into a platform that could be used by healthcare professionals and people, and do a better job of connecting them at all those moments that matter. So it took a while.
Yeah, so I totally buy into that. I love the product. I love the service. I've been on the website and played around with it and things like that. I think it's, and like, obviously we're at PocDoc, we're not in the same space, but we're familiar with some of the pathways that you're working on, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. We're at the risk assessment end of that, not necessarily the ongoing chronic care piece of it. But I can completely see the value of what you guys are doing. But what I'm interested in particularly is, it's easy to have lots of ideas, but you specifically targeted the NHS from the beginning, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you did. And having great ideas doesn't necessarily translate into getting anyone in the NHS to work with you. So how did you validate what your ideas were, that they would actually be accepted into the NHS? I know it'll probably be a process, but why, out of interest, why did you not follow the pathway of launching a diabetes management coaching app, of which there are lots of people that went that path. You chose a much harder path, a much more sort of altruistic path, if you like, but with the potential to affect a lot more people. But how did those kind of decisions get made?
So I think I want to say one couple of things. So, Steve, so when we were going through that process of sort of founder coaching, right? One of the things, obviously we looked at, okay, what are the things that we both are passionate about? Where do we align? But we also looked at like, what are our collective gaps? What are the things that we don't know? And what are the things that we don't know, right? that was really important. And that's why it took us such a long time, to get there and kind of deliver the baby called Healum. And when we actually started, I think there were things that we knew. We were very confident of that. Okay, we are very good at doing these things. And we were aligned on what we actually wanted to do over the next 20 years. We didn't think of like, oh, we actually have our plans that we made back in 2014 of where we wanted to aim, what's our North Star going to be. And for us both, I think it was always about how many, people and how many people's lives we can actually impact, improve, the quality of their lives, or help bring efficiencies for healthcare professionals, and help them do more with so much very little time and resources that they have. So those are the things we were always aligned on. And then I think there were few things that we knew, oh man, we don't know.
Right. And that helped us form a plan for the first year and a half of all the people that we needed to go and speak to. So we set up multiple long interviews with people working across primary care in the NHS, from GPs to practice nurses to healthcare assistants. We went and got a whole set of people with different long-term conditions and spent the time listening to them. Both of us had been involved with, best practice, digital UX design, AI first design, mobile first design. It all starts with basic first human principles of understanding the challenges and issues and problems that people have got in their lives. I went up to Rotherham and lived there for a couple of weeks because there was a medical weight management service in 2015 called the Rotherham Institute of Obesity, and really worked with them to, talk to their patients and understood what's going on in those people's lives, and then talk to their team and understood all the opportunities that we could have and create within a software for that team to use and a mobile app for those patients to use to just improve their outcomes, give them more support, all of that.
And I think that makes total sense. It's like the hard yards, right? It's like validating the previous ideas that you had and let's seeing if they survive first contact.
Yeah, we did that for 2 years, right? And the reason we did that for 2 years, there's an adage in technology that says, you fail fast and break things. It's the opposite in healthcare.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Move slowly and care for people, right? And so that's what we took the time to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, that kind of adage of being able to move fast and break things and it's all good doesn't really apply in health tech, because you're dealing with people's lives, people's health. There's regulatory issues, there's moral issues. It's just not really the same. So when you were going through that process, what were the things that kind of got sort of, I guess, debunked for you? Did you go in there with any preconceived thoughts about, okay, we think this is going to be the way that people might want it, and then you spoke to them and actually it turned out to be completely different to what you originally thought?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. I think some of the things one of the things that we actually learned along the way was the speed at which we would be able to move at, right? And recalibrating ourselves and our own. It's kind of like when you are sort of getting on something and you are preparing yourself, you're like, okay, you know what, I'm going to complete this in X amount of time. Yeah. So as human beings, everyone has that perception, and that was one of the things we had to recalibrate ourselves. Like, okay, you know what, this is a longer marathon than we think. We thought it was. That was one big recalibration. I think quite a lot of things in terms of just healthcare itself, where realizing that some of the things that we think in terms of models, just care models, what we had read, there is varied, belief out there even in healthcare professionals that some things work and some things don't work. So that was another learning that we had while speaking to individuals. And the biggest one I would say would be from the patient's perspective. and the way patients and healthcare professionals, because we are the one who are dealing with two different stakeholders. So we deal with healthcare professionals who use our product and patients as well. And listening to those two opposite perspectives and kind of us being that common ground, that was another big sort of learning.
You're almost the honest broker in between kind of thing.
Yeah, and
yes.
Definitely. And if I'm adding to that, the things that really amazed me were asking healthcare professionals, fine, if we create this platform, this software for you, and it only takes you 2 minutes instead of 10 minutes to create a care plan, what will you do with the additional 8 minutes? And I was really surprised. Instead of we're going to treat loads more patients and so on, the main thing was I'm just going to spend more time listening and caring for those patients. Right. That was really interesting. Right. Actually innate in the relationship between the healthcare professional and the patients. Why have doctors and nurses done all this hard work to get into a position where they can care for people? It's to care for people. They'd spend more time giving quality care. The second thing was around the sort of when we've looked at what their trust in using any solution that could communicate with people outside the clinical environment, whether there's a role for automation or not. Actually, we had to also recalibrate our thinking around how do we actually redesign the basic principles of who healthcare professionals trust and try and design a system where we've got a lot of them collaborating together, because the thing they said they trust most was other healthcare professionals, as opposed to randomly written rules and regulations and building them into any automated solution. It was that network of peers and what patients actually are saying to them. So that was the kind of biggest learning, I think, that set us up in good stead to sort of redesign our pathways around trust, transparency, and to focus on really how do you accentuate, if you're saving them time, how do you give them amazing tools to spend additional effort caring for patients?
That makes sense. And when we did a show a few weeks back with Dr. Sarah Jarvis and Dr. Ahmed Sharabani. So Ahmed is the founder of Locum's Nest, which is like a digital staffing solution. And Dr. Sarah Jarvis is clinical director at patient.info. And she joined patient.info because she'd always used patient.info as a doctor, because patient.info is written by doctors. And so it's the most popular health information website in the UK. It's kind of surpassed the NHS website. And Ahmed on the call was on the show was like, oh my goodness, I didn't he's like, I'm a huge fan of patient.info. That got me through my junior doctor, junior doctoring sort of thing. So it's sort of, I buy into that bit where, doctors and nurses, healthcare professionals get the most value from speaking to other people like themselves.
Yeah. And I want to add one more thing, right? What surprised me, and I think both of us, was, usually there is this notion that, tech, the amount of reception that we got from clinicians and the interest that they had in like just the technology and what we were trying to do, and basically all the amount of help and support we have got. I mean, it's incredible. When
Goodwill.
Back, it's like, wow, how we have come through without this support from clinicians and even patients. I don't think we would have been here. So that's another revelation.
So I've got one more question on this kind of area, and then we can move on to all the cool and amazing stuff that Healum's doing right now. But just in connection to that point that you just made, at the time when you were going out talking to people, what was the next best thing? What were people doing to do what you ultimately decided to use Healum to do? I mean, what was the benchmark at the time?
So I've got a particular moment of truth there. I'm sure Anuj has got a couple, but it's when you're sitting in front of a bunch of GPs and practice nurses who've got not much time in their day, and they're on the clock to even give you this great advice, and when they started to break down some of the real basics of how they do patient education currently, or a care plan. So like what you're competing with currently, and they held up, was a piece of paper, 2 sides A4. Here's a care plan currently. We write it out, we scribble the notes, we give it to patients, they go off. You're competing with that, right? And then the other experience of, I've got a 10-minute consultation, and in the last 2 minutes, I'm literally scrabbling around for leaflets. There's a couple of printouts. I'm directing someone to a poster on the door. Don't quite know what the social prescribing services are. I'm aerosol. Read out a list. and they're like, you're competing with that, right? So there are lots of other amazing companies, many of whom you've had on your show, who are doing all sorts of you've got platforms for structured education, for social prescribing, for creating integrated plans of care and support, for decision making across the pathway. And all of them do amazing work in their own respective ways. But we always, when we're thinking about, right, what are we trying to do in terms of making clinicians' lives easier, we draw back to those examples. And for patients, it's then when what was really shocking is just looking at how many of them would not remember what they would actually be told in the appointment. And what you're competing with there is either their own notes or all the things they then Google after the appointment, right? So you're like, how can we organize that in a way?
Well, and also, if it's written down on a piece of paper, it's completely non-trackable.
Right.
Like you can't track performance against a piece of paper, and you can't expect most people to do that.
Defo. And I think Anuj can probably talk better to like what the benchmark was for AI, right? Because that's then about solving the problem of how do you amplify the clinician's involvement and connection with the patient outside the clinical environment. And there, there are a host of people who've got their own unique way of using AI. So perhaps, Anuj, you want to pick up on that?
Yes, I think just to tie that up, I think, Steve, what we were competing, or it was a realization on us, was we were competing with such level of simplicity. And that was very humbling for us. It's like, yes, if we can't design something so simple, then there is no point. We are just, another thing in the system that people have to use, and we didn't want to be that, right? And on the patient side, some of the things that they actually wanted was, okay, I am outside, I've had this consultation, I've spent, in a year, I get to spend in terms of chronic conditions, in a year, I get to spend like 2-3 hours in total aggregated with a healthcare professional, but I'm like 8,000 hours. I'm outside, out there, living my life, making my own decision. So I want to know what I can do, what I can't do, what's right for me, what's not right for me. My life is always changing. But that was another, thing that we realized that.
Because I think there's probably, I don't know if this is true, but I could imagine there was a tendency to obsess about the time spent with the clinician and not thinking about, well, actually, that's just a tiny fraction. Hugely important, but still a tiny fraction of like you said, what did you say, 2 hours with a clinician versus 10,000 hours a year or something?
4 hours with the clinician over a year, and then about 8,000 plus sort of hours on their own dealing with the situation. So that was another thing. And then finally, what we were competing with is Dr. Google.
Okay, Dr. Google.
Yes.
Okay.
So and going on to, some of the things that we realized where automation and AI could kind of help is allowing, as John mentioned, referring to what John mentioned earlier, allowing clinicians to have those extra few minutes of conversation so that patients, feel that they have been heard, they have been, their concerns have been addressed. So that was one of the things where how can we make our system so that any healthcare professional just has to spend maybe even less than 30 seconds. This is our standard that we put on ourselves. How can they do something in our system in less than 30 seconds for the benefit of the patients? That's the amount of time.
That's your kind of benchmark.
Opposite of what you would want, from any other product. You would want people to spend as much time as possible in this. But that's the benchmark we set for ourselves. And that was one thing from which the whole aspect of like AI, because every sort of level of simplicity, there is a lot of complexity that kind of encapsulates that level of simplicity. That's where we actually started. Where how could we simplify that? How could we make it so efficient and surface things that people, healthcare professionals, not only trusted, there was a level of explainability in how they have come upon whatever it is that they are seeing in the front of the screen. And of course, it is ethical and things like that. So we can go deeper.
So what I want to do now is just switch it on to what Healum. How would you describe what Healum does? Because there's a healthcare professional focused element, there's a patient focused element, and then from what you told me prior to the show and what I've done with my research, there's an extremely sophisticated AI, artificial intelligence that almost binds everything together, as well as a huge amount of extremely valuable content. So on the face of it, there is a lot that Healum is doing. So how would you describe what Healum does and how it does?
Sure. For people with long-term conditions, Healum provides a digital service that enables them to make better decisions about their health at the moments that are important when managing their health. And it does that through a patient-facing mobile app that is connected to a patient management system for long-term conditions. So anyone with a long-term condition can effectively on their phone get advice, support, and educational content about their long-term condition. Mm-hmm. They can access a program of behavioral change and good habits and support that they've co-created with a team of healthcare professionals, but across the NHS and outside of the NHS. Mm-hmm. They can communicate back to those healthcare professionals and get help and support when they're out living their lives. And they can also monitor and understand the key aspects of both their health through their integration with their medical records, but also be able to understand their progress. The whole system is underpinned by some smart machine learning technology, that's for us, the whole purpose of that was to do two things. Mm-hmm. Firstly, make the software that healthcare professionals use better. If we're trying to create a care plan for an individual patient and you're looking at millions of articles, millions of videos, millions of goals and habits and medication and services, how do we make that as useful as possible on the screen? And for individuals, how do we make the sets of recommendations that are coming from health professionals and the other things that are surfaced in the app as relevant, as useful as possible? But this all comes down to supporting people with long-term conditions to make the decisions to manage their health.
So is it fair to say that if you have a long-term condition, you interact with your GP or some other specialist clinician for that particular condition, one of the bedrocks of that is the kind of creation or updating of a care plan, which is, how would you describe a care plan to anyone that doesn't know what a care plan is?
So a care plan is something that an individual can create for themselves in partnerships with a healthcare professional. Care plans are a standard part of the NHS's practice for many different long-term conditions, where it gives patients, people with long-term conditions, some agency and direction over how they want their care to be managed, where they can choose the goals they have in their life and how they want to manage their health in relation to that. And then the healthcare professional will then give them some resources to support that. So they'll recommend certain treatments, medications, mm-hmm. certain services that might be available to the individual.
In the local community.
In the local community, yeah, some content that will be relevant for them. And they can also, using the best aspects of behavior change that's encapsulated within our digital platform, you can just set those little triggers like reminders and daily goals and those things and that motivate people on a daily basis to just be conscious of the goals they've got for managing their health and give them the support to achieve that. One of the things we're most surprised about is when you ask people what their health goals are, right? And this comes across whenever you talk to clinicians or people, they don't typically say, oh, I want to use X amount I want to reduce my HbA1c by X amount, right? Mm. It's normally through like a human goal, like I want to lose weight for my daughter's wedding, or I want to be able to kneel down to pray, or something that's more human. And creating that kind of care plan that's more humanistic is something that we wanted to put that in the hands of people and empower them. So it wasn't just fully a clinically led care plan that then doesn't have as much cut through and take up. So that's effectively the care plans received on the mobile app. It's created in the software, and as part of that, patients get a stream of educational content, some local services information, can set their goals and habits, track and monitor, and communicate back with those healthcare professionals. That's it in a nutshell.
And it's all for free, isn't it? In the areas where it's available, It's free for the patient.
100%. We decided we weren't going to ever go down a model where we're like charging patients of the NHS to use the app. We didn't want to have a model of advertising or anything like that. Mm-hmm. We've worked with NHS commissioning partners and some other healthcare companies that serve local authorities in the NHS, to be able to, they purchase this as part of their overall procurement for managing patients, and then patients use those services for free.
Mm-hmm. So going back to what the situation was before Healum came around, the creation of the care plan, you said, was very manual and was either written down on a piece of paper, handed over, or it was scrabbling around, grabbing leaflets, pointing to posters, and that. Whereas what Healum does is allows that digital co-creation at the time, that's then almost like transmitted to that person's app that they can review on an ongoing basis.
That's right. And, it allows us to, it changes the care plan and the nature of it in, the following attributes. Firstly, the care plan becomes something that is digital. So
it's living and breathing.
It's living and breathing.
Right.
Someone can update it on a regular basis, and when events happen in their lives, the care plan can be updated.
Well, and also everyone, generally speaking, well, most people, a lot of people always have their phone with them, so it's, instead of having to carry around a piece of paper to keep referring to what your care plan is, you kind of have it in your pocket the whole time.
Yeah. Definitely. It's always on, and it's collaborative as well. It means that it's not just a conversation you might have with one nurse or healthcare assistant in year one, but it means that if, I don't know, there's a locum that day or someone else in the practice, that care plan can be, with the patient's consent, shared amongst multiple different healthcare professionals, so that it's also has the other attribute of being unifying, the unified view of the data, unified view of the action as well. So that's how it significantly changes things.
And how have you integrated AI or machine learning into the solution? Because I mean, just at the face of it, even if you didn't have the AI piece of it, I can see the value to the patient and the healthcare provider of that. But you've gone a step further and tried to integrate, or have integrated, this sort of underpinning layer of AI, machine learning. And so how has that integration happened? And really, why have you done that?
So I'll talk about the why first,
sure,
and then we'll talk about how we've done it. So why we have done, why we've looked at AI is simply because if I go back to my point of, how can we make this for the healthcare profession? How can we make this so that they can do it in less than 30 seconds?
Right.
It is there is a lot of trust in what is being done or what is being surfaced for the healthcare professionals. Because as John was mentioning earlier, there are millions of information articles that can be presented and that can be applicable to each person and their condition. So I think that was one of the key things. The second thing was we were also looking at, okay, how best to allow not only healthcare professionals but also the patients who are receiving it, how best to allow them to have access to this peer knowledge. Healthcare professionals trust most their own peers. So how can we bring that into the fold? Basically, we
in a sensible way.
Yeah, we called it as scaling second opinions.
Right.
So how can we do that? So that was the second thing. And then the third and final thing was, if healthcare professionals can benefit from this scaled second opinions, why not patients get that same advantage as well? So they are getting advantage of not only one healthcare professional, what they have done and how they have collaborated on a person's health, but also multiple other such healthcare professionals. Those are the main reasons why we decided, okay, we're going to look at artificial intelligence.
Okay.
And in terms of like integrating and how we went about doing it is basically this is about multiple different sort of areas. So one is around, there's so much content and information out there. How do we cut through the noise,
filtering it,
get that and make it valuable? So that was one of the key areas where we had to do some integration. The second thing was, what is the common language going to be running through all of this AI? What is that source of truth? So there is something called as SNOMED codes, which is what each patient's health record is kind of coded with. And that was one source of truth that we thought we will hang our models on. The second piece of thing, the second decision that we made. So SNOMED code basically runs through everything that our AI model does. So there's that common language there. And the third thing we looked at was, okay, how can we allow healthcare professionals to get access to similar sort of interventions that have worked for similar kinds of people?
Right.
whom they are consulting with right now, right in front of them. So that was the third piece of, area.
So that could be a clinician anywhere that's been dealing with someone in a similar situation, and it has.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Wow.
and even at that point, it's not just like, hey, here's what we are recommending, go and use it. Clinician always would have the ability to override that decision, saying, okay, you know what?
Yeah, clinical judgment trumps everything.
Exactly. That was, yeah, absolutely. That was really, really important for us for various reasons around bias, transparency, and keeping the whole solution ethical. And then finally, obviously, patient getting benefit of this entire sort of workflow at the end of the day. And then again, we tried it at a very small scale, and now it's all about just growing this and then running, allowing more clinicians and healthcare professionals to use it, and then getting benefit of it.
Definitely.
So I saw as part of your fundraise in your very well directed video on your website of the two of you after your fundraise, which I thought was very sweet. That you're dedicating a portion of this investment to what you're calling a live learning network.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is designed to really supercharge, I don't know if that's the right way, but sort of really move your AI technology on significantly. So what is that? I'd never heard the phrase before. So what is that and why are you doing it?
So coming back to the heart of why we've done this, people with long-term conditions make most of the decisions that affect their health when they're not inside a clinic, right? We all agree on that. It's when taking their medication, what food to eat, how to educate their family, the lifestyle habits they've got, the services they use, and how their approach to work, life, the whole thing, right? And the point is there's never going to be enough healthcare professionals to have like a doctor right there in your pocket. And there's never going to be enough healthcare professionals to just have one permanently there online guiding you through life. It'd be a bit creepy as well, right? So there's definitely, there's definitely like a role for, but in the same way, like there are lots of times when all of us would want access to the right expert or opinion at the right moment in time, right?
Well, yeah,
so
in today's world where it's always on demand.
Definitely. So how do you do that in a way that assists those healthcare professionals? Remember what I said when we asked them what they would do with this additional time. They're like, I'd give better care to people, right? So and when we looked at using our system, we thought, okay, in the little screen that the healthcare professionals have got, that is their laptop or desktop, how do we ensure that all of the right interventions and services that they're about to recommend to a patient, i.e. the clinical decision they're making, is the best possible one with all of these different possibilities? And it comes to the heart of a very philosophical debate of what is intelligence versus wisdom. Healthcare professionals trust the wisdom of other healthcare professionals. And there isn't currently a way for all of those healthcare professionals to share their wisdom in a way that accounts for the complex set of different demographics, ethnicities, multi-comorbidities that people have in their lives. So we thought, well, our approach to designing our AI-powered system, which Innovate UK helped fund, was to always solve that bias. So SNOMED codes, what they help us do is like mean that if there's a bloke in, his 60s in Solihull who has MSK, musculoskeletal issues, and who's got depression and who's got diabetes, that our algorithms can learn based on all the other patients like him and can actually look at what other healthcare professionals have done in that very situation for that person, right? So it means that we're developing lots of training models that are trained by the wisdom of healthcare professionals inputting into it, so that the things in the software that are recommended are coming from that collective wisdom, and they're trained in a context where you can overcome the issue of bias. So for us, we were
how does it overcome the issue of bias? Or what do you mean by when you say the issue of bias?
When you the issue of bias, as I've heard spoken about, thanks for the prompt, is in AI is that a lot of machine learning algorithms are being trained by data sets which represent large general populations in the community. So certain ethnic communities who've got specific health issues, specific socio-demographic characteristics, who've got where certain treatments respond better and approaches than others, they don't get picked up in these models. So you're in danger of the future of healthcare being trained on the most general characteristics, whereas health's not like that. So we wanted to create a system where we could pick up the individualized, personalized aspects of people's lives and train the models in that way, but using the trusted agents, the inputs of the healthcare professionals to do that. So our live learning network will give, and we've got some practices already opted into this, right? We've been building this proposition and concept for the last 2 years. So those GP practices will be able to join this network and will be able to share the insights as to what works best for different kinds of patient populations, and they can choose whether to also provide the app to their patients, and the app explains to their patients it's there's the data that they'll provide into this is contributing to the learning and helping and treating other people, and it enables us to do that in a transparent way that respects consent, that overcomes issues of algorithmic bias where you're training it on the general population. It does it in a way where for healthcare professionals we're allowing them just to see what is the best solution based on what their peers have done, and hopefully add a layer of trust and transparency as to what should be done for someone who has 5 conditions at the same point in time, and can give them that intelligence at the point of clinical care to better make a decision.
I mean, there's another thing I would like to add on the aspect of, there are quite a few issues in artificial intelligence and algorithms, right? So one of the main things is bias, and as John was mentioning. So there is that data bias. Then there's human bias as well. So, it's humans who are actually designing those models. So human beings always have a confirmation bias that tends to creep into the models as well. And then there is the third thing where, when you actually deploy these models in production. Now, what if in a certain, area of population, only certain types of patients or certain race of patients are being seen for whatever reason, whatever societal reason? Clearly that model will start skewing and then basically affect others who are sort of underprivileged or don't.
I mean, how do you address that, right? Because in certain areas of the country, there's a different makeup of types of people, different conditions, different issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think one of the key things that we decided early on is basically one of the key things to start with is this awareness that there can be bias. And when you are designing the models, have to be aware of these biases and design it from that perspective, not for perspective of accuracy, but perspective of, it can be wrong, avoiding conflict. So that's one of the first things. The second thing is there are various ways you can de-bias the algorithm itself. Now, that may mean that you have lower accuracy, but it would also mean that the algorithm is not doing something which it's not meant to do for the underprivileged person. So that's the second thing. Third thing, which is the most important thing, is keeping the human being in the loop. So here, the human being is the healthcare professional. So we specifically made a very hard choice that we have to always give the final say to the clinician, to the healthcare professional. They know what they are doing. So that is one of the things. And for that, we also designed a specific layer around this whole model, which would override anything that model says. So if it doesn't agree with what the clinical team has decided, that's overridden.
So it's almost, So are you sort of phrasing it like these are all of the things that you could do, for example, that the system thinks is relevant that I'm showing you, but obviously the final decision is yours.
Absolutely. And then obviously this then takes care of also patient safeguarding as well, so that they don't receive something that they shouldn't be receiving, or and at the same time it also looks at keeping the transparency in the model. So it's not like a complete black box where the computer says X and that's what you're meant to do, but you're like, okay, this is the reason why the model says whatever it says, and it can be explained with a sequence of sort of events and clearly explain why the model thinks the way it does. So these are some of the ways we can address bias and transparency.
So taking that into account, I know that you guys work already across eight trusts in the UK, which I think speaks for itself. But I've got two questions. One is, how have you been able to evidence the value that Healum brings? I know you've done at least one randomized control trial. I think you're planning another. How have you been able to evidence the value? And then the second piece is, what do you see the next 12 months being like for Healum?
Sure. So we've always had an approach to look at evidence as always just an integral part of what the company will always do. It's baked into the proposition of the product, if you like. If you think about, there are other companies who maybe they have a certain medical device and then they are sort of obliged to do some evidence in order to adhere to regulations and to demonstrate the health economic benefits and the health benefits. With us, we've started the opposite way, which is just we're all about sharing insights and learnings, and that's baked into the very DNA and fabric of what we're doing. We're always going to invest 20% of our time, money, and energy to always have some element of service evaluation, randomized control trial, technical feasibility study, always running. The UK, I would say, is the very best place in the world to be able to access lots of supporting funding and research expertise to be able to do that. It's one of the reasons why we chose to locate in the Greater Manchester region, because we receive so much great clinical support from the NIHR up there, the Clinical Research Network, Vinova CIC, who are a federation up there, helped us hugely. And and Innovate UK provide that ability to continually get evidence. So for us, we're never going to stop applying for and being part of test beds evaluations wherever we can, doing randomized control trials. Like that for us is just an ongoing, always on process, not even to just validate in a clinical way the impact and quality of life outputs, but to really understand usage and value that we're bringing to people, and to do that through a multiple of different ways. Now, deriving learnings and research from AI, I think is a really interesting area, right? You've got historical context where you've got these sort of constructs of, a randomized control trial or a research program. But the way we need to start evaluating the use of machine learning and digital technologies, I think the NIHR have made huge, amazing, great strides in publishing guidelines of how that needs to work and what the standards are. And for us, we see that there's a real opportunity, particularly with the live learning network, to provide those kind of always on insights and to understand across, thousands of permutations of patients with different comorbidities and ethnicities and demographics, what those insights look like. So you can, derive 1,000 conclusions from using the system and software at once, as opposed to just having to do the, randomized control trial that's funded and delivered in a certain way. Both have a place, and we'll always do both. But I'm saying, like with the AI stuff, you need to just approach it slightly differently in order to get the full value of the technology.
That makes sense. So what is kind of on the horizon for the next 12 to 24 months for Healum?
Cool. So Anuj, why don't you take that from like a proposition perspective, man?
Oh yeah, I mean, so basically, I think one of the biggest things that we want to do, as I was saying earlier, was always with AI is more people using it, the more opportunities to learn from it, and that goes from both healthcare professionals' perspective and people, the end users, the patients who are getting benefit out of it. So that's one of the big things that we are focusing on in the next 12 to 24 months. Then the second thing is we are heavily investing and dialing up the personalizations that we can do. Okay. So we have been piloting some of the ways to create high level of engagement with people about their own health. And there are some of the things around different technologies, around videos, around voice and things like that we have piloted. So that is another thing that we are going to be investing in. And then also improving access to healthcare. So it's not just about people who are tech savvy. We've also looked at a solution where we can include personalized healthcare for people who are not tech savvy, who
Okay.
are elderly and things like that. So that
So
is
equality of access is a really big thing at the moment, isn't it?
yeah.
Big time. And I think that theme of personalization and inclusivity, that it's really hard to execute on that. And that's what we want to spend the next, 12 to 24 months building the roadmap. And, we are about to announce some really interesting developments around providing specific content and materials for different people of different languages and ethnic groups. So really interesting. I think that's going to be a big part of what we're doing. Yeah. Secondly, the main thing is with our product and proposition, it's really doubling down on people with long-term conditions and just making the experience as good as possible in all the different moments that they need health and support. That's really important. There's a whole bunch of interoperability, integration stuff that comes as standard and par for course in this space. We've done quite a lot of integration work already, and there's more to come. And then with the rollout of the live learning network, that will start to get that kind of research and academic collaboration, and that's going to be important. And then inevitably, there's going to be more customers across the NHS, private clinics that deal in specialized treatment of long-term conditions, and lots of, which gives us more opportunity to listen to and understand more patients and the needs of more healthcare professionals. So we just want to focus on engagement, usage, intelligence, and just make that our main focus. And hopefully then the ability to scale out, to have more of an impact in more people's lives, that flows from that basically. Wow, great. Well, look, it sounds like you guys have got quite a 12 to 24 months ahead of you, and you're doing incredible stuff. So I wish you guys all the best with Healum. Yeah, fantastic company. And just thanks for coming on the show. Thanks to everyone for listening. And I wish you guys all the best. Great. Thanks, man. You guys too at PopDoc as well. Thanks for having us on the show.
Cheers.
Oh.